Chapter 1. Justin, would you mind opening us in a word of prayer this morning? Thank you, sir.
Please also be able to Dave Thunderbird as he begins to minister in the coming service. Please also be able to pastor, Brother Steve Barber, his wife, family, as they go on a short trip to
Colossians chapter 1. This morning we're going to be looking at verses 24 through 29. But in order to, Brother Kevin, keep it in the same spirit of the entire text, I just want to remind us of a couple things. Now, roughly a month ago, we began looking at a passage that deals with the supremacy of Christ. We spent 2 weeks looking at that. One I taught, one Brother Drew. And now he did teach from Hebrews chapter 1. But Hebrews chapter 1 would be the sister passage that deals with the supremacy of Christ. So it was perfect. And then we came back and tried to make an application from those things to talk about, how the supremacy of Christ deals with or answers the problem of our world today, which, gets thrown into this big phrase, postmodern secularism. That's a nice phrase, Brother Doug, but really what it means is how the world thinks. And we answered that through 4 questions. We're not going to go over in any detail, but those questions really are, who am I? And the world's view of who we are, who a person is you're just the result of some accident. Something happened, we don't know what, and started from nothing, and then the result of that was years and years of evolution, and humanity grew. Okay, and that's how we got here, and we're continuing to do all of that. We're just some cosmic accident. Now, why are we here? Well, because there's no purpose in why we were created. We weren't created. We just kind of happened. Why are we here? Well, we're here for ourselves. We're here to consume and to enjoy. That's all we do. We're here to consume all that we can and enjoy everything that we can. Now, we did point this out. When those two things get together, Brother Ivy, that's a mess. Okay, if there is no value in you because you're just an accident, and there's no value in me because I'm just an accident, then there's nothing there's no right way to treat you. There's no value that is intrinsically inside of you. And I want to consume and I want to enjoy. Well, I got no respect for you. If you have what I want to consume, I take it. If you have what I want to enjoy, I step on you. It's about control. It's about me. It becomes a very lawless environment, which explains what we're living in, and that's why you get the conclusion of it being called a postmodern world. Now, the other 2 questions were quick, and that's okay. So we live in this world. Here's who we are. Here's what our purpose is. Then what's the problem? Because you can look out there and find out there's a problem. Things aren't working well. There's a problem everywhere, in every country, in every continent. There's a problem. So what's the problem? Well, that secular worldview says the problem is that man needs more education and that we need more government control. Because those who won't fall under what education teaches them and apply that and do it that way, well, you got to control them. And there's enough problem in that, which we didn't spend time talking about, because I probably get angry. That's one of my little pet studies. But the real challenge that we're looking at in America is if you go that way, who controls the controllers? And so that's the answer. That was the problem. Now, the supremacy of Christ has totally different answers for that. Who are you? Well, Brother Kevin, I'll tell you who you are based off the supremacy of Christ. You are the crowning glory of creation. You are made in the image of God himself. When we talk about the creator God, the sustainer God, the forgiving God, the reconciling God, you are made in that image. Why are you here? You are here to show forth all of those wonderful things. By the way, that takes care of all of that problem with the ugly evil of man, and because you do have value, and there is respect there. And what I'm purposed to do is to show forth the one who created all of it. Now, so what's the problem? Well, the problem with the world, based off the supremacy of Christ, is that the world's not the way it's supposed to be. is that sin has entered into the world and things aren't running like they're supposed to. We aren't who we're supposed to be. What's the answer? The answer is he has come to reconcile. Now that brought us up to where we were last week, verses 20 and 21. And having made peace through the blood of his cross, by him to reconcile all things unto himself, by him I say, whether they be things in earth or things in heaven. So it brought us up to this place, Brother Doug, of this is who we are, this is why we're here, this is our purpose. Okay, this is the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is he's our reconciler. That fixes things. Okay, now things are the way they're supposed to be. The only problem is they aren't the way they're supposed to be where he hasn't been accepted. So we spent some time looking at that. And then we get to this verse 21, which I slowed down and I apologize. I really struggled with last week, but I'm going to tell you these two words are huge. So he paints this picture and then he gets to verse 21 and he begins this way, and you. Brother Fraser, that's so important because this isn't just about, all right, you need to know all these things. You need to know all these things. You need to know who he is. You need to have all the answers for all these problems and all these questions. Yes, that's true. We're not mocking it, but that's not enough. It's not enough that you know all these things. These things need to be personal to you. And Paul is stopping and he takes this picture, and we're not going to go through that. I'll just cover it this way with the story. I heard a story this week, earlier this week, beginning of the week, and it's about a grandpa lives in Kentucky or West Virginia. I don't remember. You'll understand in a minute how it could be either state, because he has 10 hunting dogs, and they're on the porch, under the porch, around the porch, while he's sitting on the porch. I guess it could be Eastern Tennessee too, I guess. Well, actually, it could be Cincinnati, but that's northern Kentucky. But his grandson comes over. So they're sitting on the porch. They're just talking. Basically, grandpa's listening, grandson's talking. And all of a sudden, one dog takes off, yelping. Bah, bah, bah. As soon as he does, you know what happens to the other 9? They all take off following. 5-10 minutes pass. Grandpa looks over at his son. He says, grandson, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. In about 10 more minutes, 9 of those dogs are going to come back. They're going to be tired, their tongues are hanging out, and they're just going to go back to their position. They're going to lay down, they're going to do nothing. Then in about another 20 minutes, that one dog is going to come back, and he's going to have a rabbit. And his grandson looked at him like, how do you know that? He said, well, let me tell you. One dog, he actually saw the rabbit. And seeing him is going to be enough to make sure that he perseveres and doesn't stop until he catches it. Those other 9, they just like the commotion. They got wrapped up in the excitement. They want to be part of the group. And that's not enough to keep them involved in the hunt. Amen. Now, why you waste time telling that story? Well, I liked it. That's one reason. And second, I think it has a lot of correlation to those of us in the church. Yeah. There are a lot of people who like the excitement, and they like to be part of the group. But why do I put such emphasis on these words in verse 21? And you that were sometimes alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works. Why does that matter so much? Because what these 2 verses are about is our perseverance. It's our continuing in the faith. This is going to be accomplished. He will present us holy, unblemished, perfected if we persevere, if we continue. But Kevin, it's not enough for us to continue if it's not personal in us. And Paul takes this stop right here. He spent this time going through the preeminence of Christ, the supremacy of Christ. But before he goes on to the next passage, which we're going to start to look at this morning, he stops and takes these 2 verses and says, and you. Meaning just this simple, Brother Ivy. Paul says to you, and he says to me, I want you to see the rabbit. Because if you do, you won't come back until you catch it. So that's why we stopped, and that's why we spent some time I wish I would have had that illustration before last week, because I would have been shorter. Do you believe that? So now you get to verse 24, and this is where we're going to spend our time this morning, this passage. And I would say, if I was going to give us a picture, which I'm trying to, so that we can be somewhat brief, this is kind of Paul's personal mission statement. You know, that's the big fancy thing today. Everybody wants to have a mission statement. Well, if you're the church at Colossae, which they are, Paul didn't start this church. Here, their leader ran off to Rome. They're getting this letter back. All they know about this guy is, okay, I've heard about him, and every time you turn around, he's in jail somewhere. He's getting beat somewhere, and now he's in jail again. I got to tell you, kind of as a young Christian, don't you want to know, well, if you're doing it right, why are you always in jail? I don't know if they wanted to know it back then that way, Brother Tony, but I know in America today, that's the question we would ask. Because we kind of think if you're doing it well, it's all supposed to work out the way we want. And so we get this passage that answers that question. I think it deals with two things, and this is the way as I've gone through it again and again and again, Brother Kevin, this is all I see. I see it answering two questions. One, I think it answers this challenge inside the church of our time that just struggles with the American dream. You know, we have a viewpoint that if we're doing it right, it's supposed to be a certain way. And I'm not trying to put us with the name it and claim it crowd. Okay, because we're smarter than that. We don't go that far. We don't stick the whole foot in the pool. We only stick a toe in the pool. And then we struggle and it holds us back, and we're always in some kind of adversity because it's just not supposed to be. And so I think it helps us deal with that. And I think it also answers the question that they might have had. Paul, why are you always suffering? Oh, go a little bit further. Paul, really the question I want to know is, aren't you discouraged by the fact that God keeps leaving you in jail? Justin, you ever think about that? Wouldn't the Apostle Paul be much more of use if he was out running around? Well, I would think so. You would think so. But you know who didn't think so? God didn't think so. Because if it was what was best, it's what would have happened. But that is not how we look at it when we apply it to our own lives. And so I think this passage helps us deal with those things. So we'll begin reading in verse 24. Who now rejoice in my suffering, joyful sacrifice, joyful suffering. We're going to come back and look at that, of course. I just want you to, it just throws it out there right there at the beginning. Let me introduce you to who I am. I'm Paul. And right now, in jail, writing this to you, and I am rejoicing for all the suffering I'm going through. And just in case you missed this, you know who I'm going through the suffering for? You. Who now rejoice in my suffering for you, and fill up that which is behind of the affliction of Christ in my flesh, for his body's sake, which is the church. Now, we're going to come back and look at this, but Justin, sometimes, you know, I don't get to go back, so I don't want to miss this. But if you read that again, this is what it says. It says, who fill up, who join part, who fill the missing part, who fill the empty part of Christ's suffering for you. Now, that could leave a person really doing this. Was his suffering not enough? Okay, we'll go back to verse 20, 21, where it says, who hath reconciled? Yes, it was enough. It's complete. It's done. He didn't lack some suffering, and now Paul had to join in to make it good enough. Okay, what's he talking about? Well, Paul would talk about this same thing in Philippians, where he talks about the fellowship of suffering. Oh, we're going to get there. We got enough time. We'll get there. Let's do it this way. Jay, did I give you 2 Corinthians? No? 2 Corinthians 11. I got it. Verse 23. Because when Paul talks about suffering, Mikey, when Paul talks about suffering, there's probably no one who could talk about suffering like Paul could talk about suffering. So when he says, I rejoice in my suffering, I want you to listen to what he's rejoicing in. Okay. Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more, in labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prison more frequent, in deaths oft. So let me tell you, I've worked harder, I've struggled more, I've been beaten with the lash more, I've been locked up more and longer. Of the Jews, 5 times received I 40 stripes, saved 1. 5 times I was beaten 39 times. Now, I do believe this is what would happen if that happened to any person in our time. Beaten 39 times, we would, if we got up, we would get up a little angry at God, a little disappointed. This isn't supposed to happen. Justin, you know what I'm a king's kid. I'm supposed to have a first class ticket through this. Now I have to stop in some bad places. I might have some layovers. But in the end, no, Paul says 5 times. And it is important, he points out, guess who did the whipping? It was the religious crowd who had him whipped. There's something to be said there where we get our biggest whippings. Thrice was I beaten with rods, once was I stoned, thrice I suffered shipwreck, a night and a day I've been in the deep, in journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils by my own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, everywhere, every place, every group, they had issue with me. There was always conflict. Somebody was always trying to pick a fight. In weariness, but this is Paul. He had this extra dose from God. It's just not the same as we go through. Oh no, he was tired, and he was in pain. In weariness and painfulness, in watchings often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. Besides the things that are on the outside. You know, Justin, and he lists like this was the biggest thing. You know, all of that happened, and besides that. Now, what does that sound like? That sounds like he's about to drop the big bomb, right? And besides all of that, let me tell you what really wears me down. Besides those things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of all the churches. You really want to know what wears me down? I love the churches. My heart is for you. You say, well, what are we talking about? Well, care about somebody. Honestly make somebody that important. Mike, you love your daughters, right? You know, I took your son out of it, but you love your daughters. You love your son. As he gets older, you know what happens? You have less and less control. Yeah. He's going to make some good decisions. He's going to make some bad decisions. They're going to hurt. You know what it takes to love? A lot of cost, a lot of pain, a lot of decision to stay involved. Paul said, I love the churches. Yeah. You want to talk about suffering? Let me introduce myself to you. I am Paul, the suffering servant. And we're going to get that word here in just a minute. Back to Colossians chapter 1. Who now rejoice in my sufferings for you, and filled up that which is behind the afflictions of Christ in my flesh for his body's sake, which is the church, whereof I am made a minister. Now, that's a good word. I looked to a lot of people said, that's just not the good word. That's not the right word. No, that's the right word. We've just changed the definition of that word. Okay, when we think minister, we think of a paid position. It's a paid position who now has to take care of all these things. No, that's a straight up servant. That's a person who ministers. He said, this is who I am. I minister to the churches. If you go back to verse 23, it says, I minister to the gospel. This is who I am. I am a servant to the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I am a servant to the churches. And you know what that creates? That creates suffering in my life. Anytime you make somebody else that important, you don't have control there. And that is not fun or easy. What's easy is quitting. Paul said, let me introduce you to me. Paul, this is who I am. Whereof I am made a minister according to the dispensation of God, which is given to me for you, to fulfill the word of God, even the mystery which hath been hid from ages and from generations. We'll come back and look at that next week. But now is made manifest to his saints. He said, let me tell you, this is my whole life. You want to know who I am? This is who I am. This is all that matters to me. To whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Now, Hank, this is Paul, same guy who wrote Ephesians. The whole book is about Christ in you, Christ in you. Guess what he's trying to get through right here to the church at Colossae? It is Christ in you. That's the hope of glory. That is my whole life. That is all that matters to me. That's what I'm trying to get accomplished. Christ in you. And then he goes on to tell us, let me tell you, this is how I do it. This is how I carry it out. Whom we preach, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom, that we may present every man perfect in Christ Jesus. This is what I want to do, whereunto I also labor. I mean, that's one of those great Greek words you've heard before. Everybody loves this word, agonizomai. This is painful. When we talk about labor, it's not going to punch in the clock. This is where you care. This is where you invest. This is where it becomes life's purpose. Paul says, my life's purpose is to be a servant to the gospel and a servant to the church. Now, Brother Ivy, that does not sound like much of a life. My life's purpose is to be beaten, struggled, thrown, cast off, rejected, no fun, no control, servant. That does not sound, who would sign on for that? Well, Paul would. And you know why he would? Because look how he looks at it. Verse 24, back where we started. I now rejoice in my suffering. See, Paul doesn't look like it like we do. No, it's not a horrible life. It is joy to him. Now, Justin, we could sit around the table. We'd start throwing out verses. Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptation, right? Yeah, that comes first. How about this one? I know I gave you Matthew. Matthew 5? Yeah. This is in the beginning. He gets his called out ones. He gets his Talmudim. There they are. First sermon, what does he say to them? Blessed are ye when men shall revile you. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's a little rough. I wonder if he had a big pause there. And persecute you. Oh, and say all manner of evil against you falsely. For my sake, give me the next one. Rejoice and be exceeding glad. This connection of joy and suffering. It goes throughout the entire New Testament. Give me Hebrews chapter 12. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, referring back to Hebrews chapter 11, let us lay aside every weight and the sin. You see how encouraging Hebrews chapter 11 is supposed to be for us? It motivates us. It's easier to cast off the sin and the weight that we're trying to hold on to because we see Hebrews chapter 11. That's where this is going. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Boom, here we go. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Great verse right there. But Tony, I could stop right there. He begins it and he completes it. And that is such great praise and such hope to me because it doesn't depend on me.
Yeah, that's right. Amen.
It depends on him and he will not fail.
Amen.
Because I fail all the time. But he's the author and he is the finisher who for the joy that was set before him. Joy. What was his joy? It was the cross. the shame. Joy in suffering is linked together in the Christian life. Oh, Romans chapter 8. Well, we all know this verse. This is where we know 28. We stop short of 29, which usually is true. And we know all things work together for good that them love God. We love that verse. You know there is a conditioner in that verse. We all love 28, but there is a conditioner in there. When we're making our decisions, who are we loving? What are we loving? We know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. Now, for whom he did foreknow, he also did predestine. Again, I'll just throw this out. When you woke up in this morning, you got dressed. You got a shower. Thank you. You got dressed. You got in your vehicle. And you ended up here. How did you end up here? I'm going to tell you. When you sat down in your car, you already had decided you were going to come here. It was predestined where you were going to drive. Okay, let me tell you how this verse is, Mikey. So someone doesn't try to get you confused with all this predestination stuff, okay? He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day. He has a place you are going to end up. Where is that? Today you are not like him, but there is a day we shall be like him. That is where we are predestined to end up. So he predestined you to be what? The image of his son. We are going to be like Jesus. We are called to be like Jesus. Now, how does that fit into all of this joy and suffering thing? Well, what did Jesus do? He obeyed the Father, who sent him down here to do what? I didn't come to be served. I came to be a servant and give my life for all men. So all of that, we want to claim from 28. Well, really what that means is we need to be living like verse 29. Now, how can you do that? Which, by the way, I'm going to tell you, back to this whole thing. But Kevin, that just goes against our society. And unfortunately, there's a lot of our society in every church, not this church, but other churches. And maybe that's why the American church is full of pew sitters who are full of philosophies and words, but who have no actions. The idea of joy flowing from persecution cannot be ignored in the Bible. It is not just endure it. It is joy in suffering, which makes me want to ask, Paul, what is wrong with you? Are you, this is where I want to get. This is what I want to say. Paul, are you so spiritual that food and freedom and comfort and all those kind of things don't matter anymore? Well, we read 2 Corinthians chapter 11 on purpose because no, they matter. He wants food just as much as you do. Freedom matters to him just as much as it does to us. It's just something matters more. It's not that they don't matter. Brother Hank, joyful sacrifice is when you give up something you love. Yep, love. I'm not going to demean any of that. I'm not going to tell you it shouldn't matter. You give up something you love for something you love even more. Sacrifice is the test of our claim of the preeminence of Christ. God matters most, then my wife, then my children. I got the answers right. Everybody pat me on the back and tell me I'm good. When struggle comes in our life, it shows us whether that's true or words. Brother Ivan, we were supposed to be a lot further. Let me do this. most everybody knows. Brother Ivy, I don't know if you know. I met my wife on the mission field. Her father was over there in Europe. He started a mission work to the military, which you say, well, don't they have chaplains? Yep, but every chaplain's not like Brother Drew. And he had served in World War II. He actually was locked up in Dachau and whatever. He ended up over there. Now, I ended up marrying his daughter. I took the best thing out of the house. Amen. And that gave me an opportunity to talk to him about a lot of things. His son was my best friend. His daughter was my heart. And he was the most influential person in my life. I remember when his son, at 16, got to come back to the States for the first time in 5 or 6 years. Let's see, Angie, how old were you when you went over there? 8. So you were 13, so it's been about 5 years. So it's the first time he got to go back in 5 years. I started going to the church. When I started going to the church, it was running about 250. There were roughly about 85 in the Christian school, which, by the way, is good numbers for half the churches in the United States today. But I will tell you this, 2.5 years later, when my dad got transferred back, it was running over 500, and it had over 200 in the school. Okay, so it was just an amazing place to be. But Justin, I remember when, am I running out of time? I remember when his son came back for the first time. And when he came back, he was in the States for roughly a month. I don't remember. Seemed like a month to me. My best friend was gone. Maybe it was just a couple weeks. But Ms. Gonzalez, when he came back, it was very different. You see, when he came back, all he could think about are the things he didn't have. You know, he didn't have family all the way around him. He didn't grow up like his cousin who grew up in the same city his whole life and knew everybody, and this person became this, and this person became that, and this person was the coach who now runs the police force. And he didn't have any of that. He didn't have the American teenage experience. He couldn't drive. You can't drive till 21 over there. And he just, Brother Kevin, all he thought about is what he didn't have. Now, when I first met him, he was so attractive to me because this guy was different than me. He was happy about everything, and he was involved in what his dad wanted to do, and he was caring about people. And I mean, when he went over there, Everett went over there with his son. They started with nothing, no one, no building, no anything. Okay, well, he went to but the military didn't want him. He had to build that relationship. And you have to maintain it because let me tell you, it's like, do you want to run a school? Brother Doug, you run a school, right? How much does the public school like you? How much do you think the chaplains liked the church taking away the people that, kept their job? This was not an easy situation, and he did all of it with his son. Justin, it was just amazing for me to see that relationship, especially coming from a home that did not have that between me and my dad. Okay? So when he left and came back and was so different, that is something I never really got over. 5 or 6 years later, I got time to spend a lot of time with my father-in-law. So Miss Pat, I asked him. I'll say, when Lee came back and you had all these problems, and let me tell you, when they had problems, there was problems. 2 hard-nosed, 2 hard-headed people. And, he has now his son who's never been this way before and all of this rebellion. Mikey and I got transferred out, so I missed most of the worst of it. But I knew what was coming because I knew them both. So I got a chance. We're riding, 2 o'clock in the morning. We're coming back from Chicago or something like that. And it's always good to be leaving Chicago, never good to be going to Chicago. And I said, well, didn't you know? Didn't you realize? Oh, more than that, when you decided to go on the mission field, and he just cut me off. And I can't remember word for word, but I remember this conversation. Because it's an answer I needed to hear. Justin, he said, yeah, of course. I had to leave my house. I had to leave our job. I had to leave future as I knew it. I had to leave the lie of control because that's what we think, in this. So I had to leave that. I had to leave the people we know. I thought about the kids. I thought about the wife. I thought we were going to even have to leave the dog. I had to go and tell them we'd probably have to leave the dog. You know, they were more upset about leaving the dog. Because we just hold on to anything. He said, yeah, of course I thought about all of that. But then he told me this. I just wanted to be in the place God had for me and doing what he had for me even more. I said, oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. Oh, but wait. You were a dad. Didn't you think about your kids? Of course I did. And I thought God was big enough to handle them too. Joyful sacrifice is about loving something more than what we're losing. I'll give you another illustration. It's an easy one. It's quick. All right, here you go. You've been through this more times than I have. I remember when Angie first got pregnant with Eric. Everybody said, oh, this is such a wonderful thing. It's such a wonderful thing. You're going to want to be in there? I said, I don't want to be in there. I don't want to be in there. Angie said, do you want to be in there? I looked on her face. So there's no way I'm saying, no, I don't want to be in there. I want whatever you want. That's a beautiful thing. Let me tell you now, it's not a beautiful thing. Wife, you look beautiful. It was scary, and it was not beautiful. And then it wasn't any better the second time. Actually, it was worse the second time. Jonathan quit breathing. She's like, is he breathing? Uh-huh, he is. And third time, Josh, and by then it was, I didn't even pay attention. We were watching some movie over here. I was babysitting. I mean, to me, Mike, that will forever be traumatic. But I guarantee you, if you ask her, or if you ask your wife and you say, look, we can undo it, we can take away all of that pain and all of that suffering. We just won't have the kids. For the joy, I'll endure. Paul says we're supposed to be ministers of two things. Now you have to understand this. That's going to create some suffering. So, Jeremy, I just want to come to church, and I want to hear something uplifting, and I want to have some fun. I want my kids to make good friends, and I do not want to hear about suffering. Is it wrong? Well, I'm going to tell you, look, this Christian thing, it's not my plan. It's not your plan. It's God's plan. So it's only going to work his way. Have the conversation with him. I'm confident he can change your mind. It just means you have to actually talk to him. I'm simple. I could have 10 dogs. We've been called for two areas, just like Paul. To minister to the church and to be ministers of the gospel. We just, 2 minutes, we just have to answer that question. When we come to church, are we looking to minister, or do we demand to be ministered to? Are we consumers, or are we investors? Okay, because I'm telling you, to be a real investor is painful. You have to love something more, or you won't do it. And it's much the same. Two things, suffering and witnessing. Man, is there anything we don't want to hear even more? I'm going to read this. And then I'm done. If I can find it. Here it is. Now it came to pass that a group existed who called themselves fishermen. And lo, there were many fish in the water all around. In fact, the whole area surrounded by streams and lakes filled with fish. And the fish were hungry. Week after week, month after month, year after year, these who called themselves fishermen met in meetings and talked about their call to fish, the abundance of fish, and how they might go about fishing. Year after year, they carefully defined what fishing means, defended fishing as an occupation, and declared that fishing is always to be primary task of fishermen. Continually, they search for new and better methods of fishing, for new and better definitions of fishing. They sponsored special meetings called Fishermen's Campaigns and the Month for Fishermen to Fish. These fishermen built large, beautiful buildings called fishing headquarters. The plea was that everyone should be a fisherman and every fisherman should fish. One thing they didn't do, however, they didn't fish. In addition to meeting regularly, they organized a board to send out fishermen to other places where there were many fish. All these fishermen seemed to agree that what is needed is a board which could challenge fishermen to be faithful in fishing. The board was formed by those who had the great vision and courage to speak about fishing, to define fishing, to promote the idea of fishing in faraway streams, in lakes where other fish of different colors lived. Large, elaborate, expensive training centers were built, whose original and primary purpose was to teach fishermen how to fish. And we could go on and go on and go on. Here's the thing. In fact, it goes on and talks about one guy went out, actually fished, caught 2 fish, came back and told everybody, and they immediately promoted him and had, go tell everyone why you should keep fishing. Imagine how hurt some were when one day a person suggested that those who didn't catch fish were not really fishermen. No matter how much they claimed to be, yet it did sound correct. Is a person a fisherman year after year if he never catches any fish? Are we involved as ministers of the gospel? And are we committed to be ministers of the church? Brother Doug, you close in word of prayer, please.